Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for coming along and joining us this fine Wednesday evening, Wednesday afternoon, whatever the time is where you guys are right now. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the future of FPV. In the next few minutes, we're going to solve every problem in FPV. Everything's going to be fine, and it's going to have a very, not that, or it doesn't have a bright future, but it's having an even brighter future, frankly, with the panel that we have this evening. Now, if you have any questions for the panel or anything to say about the subjects that we're covering, please, as I'm just putting in the chat there, please tag at Geeksvana so that I can see those messages a little bit clearer from the rest of the messages as my earpiece falls out. Very cool. But thank you very much to say everyone for joining us. I see a few people in the chat. Andy Cortez, Smeghead, the Mojek, good to see you. Clocked, Mike Henrik, good to see you. KPV, Sam FPV was in there earlier as well. Bruce from XJet, should get spicy. Oh, Elliot Naseby, great to see you as well. Andy Keast, Fly Sky Drones. And thank you, Andy Cortez, for the first super chat of the evening. £2. Here's £2 for some new props. Why do I need new prop? Oh, okay, for FPV props. Okay, thank you very much, Andy. I appreciate it. Okay, without further ado, because we've got a lot to talk about tonight, I'm going to bring in the panel, and here they are. What a fine-looking bunch of people. Okay, so we're going to go around very, very quickly and introduce a few people. First of all, I'm going to start off actually at the bottom with Troy from Quad Standard Labs. Troy, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Troy. I'm from Quad Standard Labs. Quad Standard Labs started in 2019 by myself. It was forward-facing, aimed at creating a professional market to provide access for first-person view tools and application, and helping develop the future kind of commercial uses for using first-person view drones instead of traditional drones.
Awesome. And for those that know your products well, you have things like the Siccario is in your stable at the moment, which is that fantastic cinelifter that I have dreams about, frankly. And I don't even fly much FPV, but I dream about that quad.
You know, we have just about everything from access to providing red cameras, Komodos. We do cinelifters, absolutely, is kind of at the heart, I guess, of revenue, so to speak. But we sell a lot of 5-inch drones, a lot of squirts, a lot of just cinewhoops, small stuff. Whether it's professionals or just people looking for a professional FPV tool, some of our clients are actually just hobbyists that just appreciate a high quality standard, as well as the after sales support kind of when necessary, which we try not to have to actually do, because that's the goal, is to send something out that's ready to go. You get it. You can, from opening the box to getting flying, hopefully do it without us. But if you do have a problem, let us know, and we always do our best to make it right. So really anything FPV related or drone related, we've got projects that have nothing to do with FPV, or sometimes even drones that come through our doors. So if it's something interesting and technology driven that's you want to be a part of or figure out how to do, we'll help you figure it out.
Exactly. And one thing I will say about Troy, he's super, super good at communicating. So if you have questions, that type of thing, get on his Insta.
My wife or my therapist.
Get on his Insta DMs, etc., and he will answer questions. Okay, sitting next to me here, I'm going to jump up the top again, just to wake him up, is Ian from Mads Tech, as everyone will know him. Ian, how are you, sir?
I am fantastic, Sean. Thank you for inviting me along, as always.
It's great to see you. Now, you have for those of the audience that don't know you, perhaps our US audience, you have an FPV-focused channel based here in the UK. So you're probably quite a good person to have on for this type of subject matter.
Yeah, I've been around a while, been flying FPV, not quite as long as some people, but I think everything I've ever done has revolved around FPV one way or another, whether it be camera drones, off the shelf, or, your general bando kind of stuff.
Very cool. Well, thank you for being here, sir. And down the bottom again, I'm going up and down. I'm actually going by how the buttons are ordered on my little machine here, rather than any kind of order. But we have Simon Dale from FPV UK. Thank you very much for being here, Simon. Could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. FPV UK is an association of drone and model aircraft pilots. Obviously, with a bit of a hint at FPV, although these days I'm not sure. It was all about FPV initially. I think now the split is a bit more even between FPV and off the shelf DJI type drones.
Yes.
We've got 5,500 members.
Awesome.
And we've been going since 2009. I founded it in 2009. Also, I'll just quickly touch on some other bits. AirProx Reality Check, little website I run that looks at drone air proxies, or air proxies involving drones, supposedly,
indeed.
And I used to run firstpersonview.co.uk, which was our retail outlet starting in 2008 until 2018. And then also Drone Doctor, ran Drone Doctor founded that in 2014, I think, and ran that until 2018, which was repairing and continues to repair DJI drones and things like that.
Superb. So just a small amount of experience in the drone field then. So
Yeah.
Yeah. No pressure for the next person then. Simon Ritterband, who is the managing director at Moonrock Insurance, a drone specialist insurance company based here in the UK, covering both commercial and hobbyist pilots. Hi, Simon. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Sean. Thanks very much for having me.
And thank you very much also for being a supporter of the channel, of course, as well.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm probably the least exciting person on the panel. I mean, everyone got doing great things, and I'm the big bad man who comes along and talks about insurance. And hopefully we are there to help and support you guys when things do go wrong. So we do play a valuable use within the market. I started the company in 2016. It was a very, very small market. Obviously, drones were just starting out. And I think, we're now probably one of the largest drone insurers in the UK. We launched a hobby-specific policy about 8 weeks ago. So, because there was a huge requirement for uninsured pilots, they could get their public liability with the likes of the associations like FPV UK. But up until then, you couldn't actually insure the drone itself. And we were inundated with people requesting it. But then you can understand underwriters were a little bit hesitant to offer insurance to somebody who was just flying it recreationally without any training. However, you look at some of the losses and the loss ratios and the stability of drones now. We've got a product in the market and it's doing really well. So it's perfect for this type of industry, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here and also adding a different angle to the discussion as well, which I thought was really important to bring. We've got people from the hobbyist side of it. We've got people from the professional side. FPV UK being here is fantastic, and and also John Coopy. I suppose we better mention him. John, hi. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Good to be with you guys. Sean, thanks for inviting me. It's always fun. Pleasure to be here. Hopefully, we're gonna save FPV tonight, right?
Do you feel like it needs saving?
Actually, yeah, I do think it does need some saving. There are some bad things going on, but yeah, we'll see what happens.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here. John runs a US based FPV. Well, it's a drone channel, but because he will review camera drones on there as well. But it's very heavily FPV focused, and I think your personal focus, as far as the drones you like to fly, etc., is very much focused on the FPV side as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. I also do tech reviews related to FPV. Tearing down a GoPro to make it into a naked one, things like that. Anything tech geared toward FPV, I do as well.
Very cool. Excellent. Okay, so and there are links to everybody's businesses and channels in the description below, so please do go and support them, because these are the people that I would choose and to speak. Everybody that I asked, the first list, the prime list, all said yes, so I'm extremely lucky from that point of view. So we'll crack on. We have a set number of questions that I want to pose to the panel, and we can hopefully give some opinions and get this debate going and get the conversation going. If there is anything that you want us to discuss on there, then you can tag at Geeksvana in the chat, Bruce XChat, just so you know, tag at Geeksvana with your questions and I can put them forward. Just giving a little dig to Bruce there. Okay, so the first one, indeed, shout out to Bruce. So the first one really is, and this is something which I've been trying to get my head around for a little while. And the title of this question is, should we have separate regulations for FPV self-build to the rest of camera drones. For me, as someone that, I mean, I can't call myself an FPV flyer because but the only one I fly is the DJI FPV drone, which I know is, there's at least one person, Nemo, in the chat that's cringing if I call myself an FPVer, if that's my only experience. But to me, I feel that there's a potential that we have almost like here in the UK, we have certain rules and regulations for cars with 4 wheels and motorbikes with 2 wheels. And although, of course, they share the same road as FPV and camera drones share some of the same airspace, they are different things and they do have slightly different regulations, licenses, and that type of thing. What does the panel think about that? Should we start off with Simon Dale?
Yeah, well, I think you're probably right. The new regulations that we've got in the UK are all sort of focused on these C ratings, the mythical C rating.
Yes.
Which just doesn't work at all for
no,
for your homebrew aircraft, which is we sort of end up as model aircraft. I think because we don't fall into drones. When it's an FPV home built aircraft, it becomes, just a model aircraft essentially in terms of the regulations, and that's where the Article 16 I think kind of comes into play, or that's the only alternative other than sort of staying 150 meters away.
Indeed, because if you look at this page, which is the requirements for flying in the open category, and again we have the 3 airspaces that currently in the UK, and obviously therefore we have the 4 classes of drones dotted through there from C0 to C4. There's a big gap in the middle there where you have the sub 250 gram self-build, privately built, which can fly in the A1, and then there's pretty much no mention. Well, there is no mention until you get into the A3 far from people. So without things like the Article 16 authorization, things like the FPV flyer flying in a congested area, town centre, park, that just wouldn't be able to happen. And pre that happening, that's very much what I was talking about on the channel last year, saying I even had a video saying, is FPV dead in the UK? Because without that. So do you think that there should be a separate set of rules, or do we need to refine the existing rules to bring FPV more into it?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard work.
Yes.
It'd be hard work getting them, but let's put that to one side, I suppose. Yes, I think if there was some kind of, if you're flying, perhaps you've got some mitigations. So it's a lightweight model, or you're flying in an area where there's no one around, or you limit yourself to the height of the nearest structure, sort of a shielded operation.
Yes, indeed.
Then why can't you crack on? There's a guy who actually flies a little sort of tiny FPV in the park outside my front door every few days, and you just think, what harm is he doing to anyone? It's absolutely fine. He's having a lovely time. Everyone just walks past, no problem. Quite interested in it. Whereas if you mentioned that at Gatwick to the CAA, they'd fall off their chairs. It's oh no, because they tend to treat everything like an airliner. That's the problem.
Yes, no, I completely agree with that. So in terms of the US side of things, Troy, I'll put the same question to you next. And especially as someone that deals with some of the larger quads with the cinelifters and that type of thing as well, do you feel like there is enough representation in the US side of things, the FAA, for the self builders?
So, man, this is such a broad strokes conversation that I feel like is much more needs to be defined in smaller strokes all over the place in different areas, in different paintings almost. And so, the whole time that everybody already has been talking, Sean and Simon both, in my head, I just kept thinking, it's not just necessarily about the platform, and it's not just necessarily about the airspace, and it's not even just necessarily about the pilot, but all 3 of those things, and probably many other things, are really relevant to the decision making. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is this: every government agency across the planet was way behind on understanding the breadth of drone technology, or it's really aerial robotics, which is really what we talk about here.
Yes.
And automation and technology advances that are not just about flying drones. They're going to be about self-driving drones. They're going to be about, underwater sea vehicles, all kinds of ways that technology is now going to affect us. It's going to need some sort of regulation. Drones just happen to be guided, self-guided missiles by people that don't really care about what they're doing other than themselves most of the time. And quite frankly, though there haven't been a lot of accidents or issues in the United States or across the globe that we know of, anybody that says it's not possible or that it's not, like, if I wanted to, I couldn't go try to punch a hole in an aircraft up, right there that I'm seeing right now out my window. I could at least try to, and that's not necessarily great. So where I end up with this is I don't know the answer, right? Am I there?
We still have you. Yeah, we still have
I hadn't touched my computer and it timed out. So I don't know the actual answer to the question you're asking. What I do know is, as regulation continues to become to the forefront and become a reality, we'll adapt and we'll grow and we'll do what we have to. I don't think that in any way any of this is going to stop the industry. I don't think it's going to stop application. I just think that those that are implementing it and using it are going to have to adapt. And I do think that it's going to be a mixture of things. I think that I will be able to sell just about anything I want the way that we do things here, because they are, custom built aircraft for specific purpose, sold to specific commercial individuals. I don't see that as becoming a real pain point for me, because the commercial individual may end up having to prove some sort of registration or some sort of certification to me to purchase that drone, or I may have to implement some sort of device on that drone, like we've all talked about, which we already know the FAA and other regulatory agencies are going to have developed at some level, and it will be available for me to just basically kind of pop on there in some fashion. It may take a little bit of R&D, but it's not going to be, Troy, you got to build your own flight controllers to make this work. So, so to me, business as usual until it's not business as usual, and then we'll be agile, right?
Indeed.
And so that's my answer for how it affects us.
Okay. And anybody else on the panel would like to put anything forward on that particular part of the subject?
Yeah. Okay.
Call me an idiot.
I was going to say one thing, but yeah, you go ahead.
So I think I'm going to give a little bit more of a solid answer to this one. Should we have separate regulations for FPV and self-builders? No, but before you cancel me, let me continue. All right. So one of the things that, look, more regulation just makes things more complicated, makes it harder to comply. Okay, what is a crowd? What is a crowd in a park? So if there's 5 people in a park and then 6 show up, you need to stop flying. Adding more regulations is not the answer. That being said, I don't think that we should carve out specific model types for exemptions in the regulations. I think it should be based on flight type. And that's more what Simon was referring to about the shielded operations. If you're flying a little tiny whoop or something through the woods, that's not really what we would consider navigable airspace.
Yeah.
A drone, a helicopter is not going to come down into the middle of those woods. If you're just flying above the treetops, barely above the treetops, then you should be good to go without, say, worrying about the spotter requirement, for example. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm in favor of more flight-specific relaxation of regulations that would, in turn, end up benefiting FPV. But if I can fly this under those shielded operations, I don't also see a reason why the Mavic Mini shouldn't also be able to do so.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I think it's important to be fair to all the models.
Yes and no. I mean, my only argument against that, I was agreeing with you right until you said Mavic Mini, actually, because I think shielded operations and very low level airspace flights with FPV quads, whoops, that type of thing, I think should almost have an exemption, in my opinion, and I don't think there is a risk factor there. Troy very kindly did put his neck on the line and say, actually, there could be problems with those kind of drones. He's trying to get my attention.
Oh, I just wanted to add one kind of contextual note to what how I'm trying to discuss this, because I I feel like we're already as a group kind of pigeonholing ourselves into part of a discussion that, again, the broad strokes that I think are not being thought about. I've seen some comments on the side here. I get it, Matt. Look, FPV guys, the ones you know, and a lot of the community are great people, and they love whatever. And so are all drone people. Like, at the heart of what we're wanting to do here, I get it. We're all great people. We all, a large majority of us do care.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's not about that, and it's not even just about like, is the woods navigable airspace for other aircraft? Are the woods private property? Is there other people in the woods? Like, I get it. It's a tiny whoop, guys. We should just be able to fly it wherever. But if you go put it in a kid's eyeball and that prop that's guarded somehow scratches his cornea and he can't see for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
I get it. It was cool. It was fun flying around your front door. But, you know, people aren't asking to be put themselves in those situations. So I just think that, again, this technology is affecting the world and going to be implemented in the world in a new way that as much as we want to continue to think about, we have all the answers, like we're going to solve them. The problem is there's more problems than what we even want to admit most of the time. And that's where I think it all starts.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
Simon.
Yeah.
I think I've said this on various different shows with yourself, is unfortunately, insurance will probably lead the way in this. You know, it's going to be a situation whereby if the insurer says, well, we're not going to insure that, you know, either it's dangerous or we're not happy with where it's taking place, or they see losses coming in on a regular basis, kids losing their eye from a whoop, the whole industry will just say, right, well, we're not insuring those. And at that point, then regulation will say, well, actually, to fly these, you're actually going to have some form of insurance.
Yes.
And that's often how regulation works, is if an insurer, if someone's got a product and they can't get insurance, they can't use it because they can't get any coverage for it. So there's going to be a view at some point that if the FPV UK scenario, and it's going to be prevalent, there's going to be a view to looking at making sure there's the relevant insurance in place. At the moment, you know, if you're flying the DJI FPV UK, not a problem. You know, it's all covered. You're insured for it. But I think, again, coming back to maybe some of John's points, and maybe looking at the type of flights that are taking place in particular airspaces, that might be something to look at. I think there are a lot of things to break down here, but each of it has to be followed by insurance about what the underwriter's prepared to accept as an acceptable risk.
The interesting thing, Sean, I was just going to say
please carry on
this is it with FPV is different to standard drones. Like, for instance, if you take a Mavic or something like that, it's very hard to build something equivalent, but FPV remains the one bit of the hobby where actually what we build is no real different than what you buy. So for instance, the DJI FPV drone is actually bigger, heavier, and potentially in an incident going to cause more damage than an FPV drone I've built, because DJI have had to make certain compromises to be able to get it to do what a consumer drone would do. And the reality is, is an FPV drone that we build any more dangerous? If we break this down, the reality is no. If anything, an FPV drone that we build is a little bit safer in the event of an incident, because off-the-shelf drones don't come with prop guards. Off-the-shelf drones don't come.
Could you say, but now I don't want to interrupt you, but I hear this argument a lot from the FPV community, and it is a community with a very good safety record as far as reported is concerned. But to me, something like a 5 or 6 inch quad with exposed props and that type of thing that can go very, very fast, 99 miles an hour, shall we say? Is that the legal limit at the moment? Yeah, but some even faster than that. That is a weapon flying through the air. So I have a slight disagreement
but that's the same as the ready to fly. That's what I'm saying. There's no separation in safety. That's the thing. Yeah. And that's the thing. There's no separation in safety.
How do we test the builder's quality of these drones?
Yeah. Are there any standards? Where's the standardization? You know, is there any ISO kite marking? There's the kite marking. Where is the, where's the standard?
But again, you have to then take risk. Where is the proof? The risk is any more dangerous that a person builds it than
go on
manufacturer.
Facebook and look at the people that say their drone fell out of the air in the FPV community, and go compare that to the DJI community of flyaways. How much you want to bet that it's like 100,000 to 1 bad issues in the FPV community versus off-the-shelf drones bought. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, I get the argument of, how is a small, tiny wood? I mean, again, I feel like we're still pigeonholing ourselves back down to this, but I built it and it's safe. Like, who cares? Like, it's not the people that around you that while you're trying to fly this is the issue. That's why, like, again, it's not about the operator always. It's not about the drone always. It's about really the biggest part is about where you're going to fly it. And I just think that it's going to be at an AMA field, a FRIA, or some safe location. Is going to be, that's where we're headed. And if you get caught flying your little tiny whoop in the out front of your yard, you just might get a ticket, or you might get even thrown in jail in the right place. Like, or maybe you have some sort of insurance and you're a commercially licensed person able to fly that because of your whatever. But I mean, that's all got to get shaken out in long-term stuff. I do think this brings up an interesting thing, which I'd like to actually ask Simon. It's actually been on my mind since I heard he was in the insurance industry. What about having a company certify or inspect and then put a rubber stamp on and say, this homebrew built thing is actually airworthy, right? Because that's something we've been discussing at QSL as a business model. And I hate even saying it publicly because somebody's now going to go do it straight up. I don't have the time to get it done, but we've talked to insurance folks here in the United States and some other people, and they all seem very interested in the idea of like a company like us saying, send your drone here, and for $99, we'll examine, we'll test, and we'll certify if it's airworthy or not. We'll serialize it, and we'll create a database that has that information in it that insurance underwriters can then come to and use as a basis for underwriting this insurance that we're talking about of the future. So I don't know, that's where I think this all really goes.
Listen, it's a very valid point, and actually it's not something that it's something that we already do at the moment when it comes to maybe sort of training schools. I'll assess, or the team will assess, the competency of that training school or examiner, or if in your instance a drone manufacturer. They're not going to kite mark it, they're not going to say we rubber stamp it, but what they will do is they say, you'll be able to say to your clients, if you go to Moonrock Drone Insurance, their underwriter has belief in the product that you're offering, that they're willing to give you a discount on your insurance. That's how they would certify a drone that has been, made by QSL or yourself. That's how they'd say, right, we've got faith in this. It's a system that we have confidence in. Just like a drone school training provider would say, we like this organization. They're thorough. They've got great standards. If you go to this drone school to be trained, we will offer, discount, or you can get discounts through them. That's how we get around that.
Okay, because it is an interesting thing, because obviously with the C-class drones here in the UK and the EU, we are going to see camera drones coming out of the factory with those stamps on saying, this is deemed safe to be flown in a congested area if you have this certificate and that type of thing, etc. And I know that when we've spoken, we've had the Jonathan Nicholson on from the CAA a few times, and when we've spoken about retroactive labeling even, so this is, literally holding up a Mavic 3 before the standards are out and a Mavic 3 afterwards. The one after can have the sticker, but it's very, very difficult to even be able to get the older Mavic 3 retroactively labeled, because, they're concerned about, diluting it and people being able to basically stick stickers on anything, etc. So it is a very difficult thing, and I can understand that. Okay, moving on to discussion of spotters and the requirement. Is it needed? Are there alternatives? Does things like shielded operations remove that requirement? And this really comes from the point of view that every conversation I have with hobbyist FPV flyers, one of the immediate hurdles that they have with the rules and regulations, and in terms of following all those rules and regulations, is the first one is actually, you need a spotter. They're unable, pretty much most people are unable to stick to that because they obviously fly alone. I'd love some opinions on the need for a spotter and whether or not things like shielded operations could be used to remove that. And can I start again with Simon Dale, as you are FPV UK?
I thought you might. Yeah, it's very hard to the idea of getting the CAA to drop that, to be honest. We have had that argument for the last 13 years. But I mean, going back to what I said before about, yes, if you could, we introduced in the Article 16 this concept of a sterile area.
Yes.
And whilst that doesn't quite do what we're talking about, it's kind of potentially a way in on
Moves
this.
towards it, yes.
Yeah. So the thing with a sterile area is if you're flying a group of you, you don't have to have a spotter each. You can have one spotter for the whole race, for the whole day sort of thing, which makes sense. And I could imagine potentially with some mitigations, potentially moving that concept forward.
Okay.
That we're in a sterile area, or we're in a shielded location, or with the CAA, the new regs, it's all about a safety case, isn't it? Presenting to them your operational safety case. We can do this, and in fact, the Article 16 is basically a safety case. It's
yes, it's
an operational authorization, which is based on a safety case, and we can operate, we can do this safely. We think we don't have to do this bit of the regulations because we're going to do this, and this. And in our case, it's our handbook and reporting procedure and all that stuff that they insisted on. So yeah, there's a potential, but it's hard.
Yes,
hard
because
work
it's hard to get around that risk, isn't it? I mean, I've again, having flown the GGFPV drone, I have had my first experience in the last few months of flying regularly with goggles, with a spotter, of course. And although I find that the situational awareness of the aircraft is increased, I would argue, from the point of view that obviously I'm with the aircraft, what's actually going on around me, and as Troy was saying earlier about who's walking in those woods, what's coming up behind you, that type of thing, what's actually changing around you is a very, very difficult thing to control. And then, of course, we get back to Simon Ritterband's position of risk and insurance. And it's actually, how do you make that a safe operation? I have had because I've been using some HoloLenses recently, and I have had the idea recently, which was actually for an augmented reality camera drone operation, which is coming up on the channel next week. And whether or not we could use that kind of thing where you do have glasses with a heads-up display which shows the video feed of the FPV drone, but then of course your periphery vision is free to be able to spot the aircraft and to have some kind of situational awareness.
I have actually tried some. I think it was Epson Mavario or something, some goggles where you could see loss, but you could also see FPV. It was very weird to use.
Yeah, and I think that might be the issue, mightn't it? Because it's if you bear in mind, I've seen a few videos on John Coopy's channel where you're even trying to get rid of just a little bit of daylight coming in from the side of your goggles and that type of thing. So to have two things to have to deal with might just be too much.
So it's interesting because I'm actually vice president of the local AMA field here. And so awesome. I'm sure that'll be held against me to various degrees, when in reality, I can tell you from the inside that, the AMA is, again, part of the problem. They haven't upheld us they haven't held standards even to us as a club to maintain standards. And so, it starts there. But anyways, to the point of blind spots, which you don't see, I see people talking about, what's a spotter going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Look, I'm not here to argue with the folks in the chat. But I mean, if you can't admit that you have blind spots, just like when you're driving your vehicle and you have blind spots and you don't see everything around you. Perfect example, happens every day at our AMA field. We have signage all around. It's in the middle of a 44,000 acre park that people walk around, and they have a trail right around our flight area. And guess what? Randomly, people just walk across the field while we're flying. While we have AMA, our multi-GP races are in progress. Like, heats are going. Vanover is ripping the track and chasing down Evan, and they walk right across the field. So there are blind spots wherever you're flying. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying that we're going to shut a hobby down. Seeing people say, what about teaching kids? How do kids get drones to build? There will be lightweight, inexpensive options that are complicit with whatever's going to be going on, like whatever the regulation is. I've said since the first day I ever saw a Parrot drone, which was back in 2014, that I thought Parrot was doing what all drone industries or all drone companies should have been doing at the time, which was producing lightweight, destructible drones that people said were really cheap materials. But I truly believe at the heart of what Parrot was doing was they were trying to build the most least likely to cause damage product because they're a European company, and they
Absolutely.
knew that standards were going to be coming. So really the weird thing is nobody praises Parrot for kind of being at the forefront of having kind of foam, lightweight plastic drones that do all the same things a lot of other drones do. They just now are kind of catching up.
Yeah,
and so I think
indeed.
Parrot's a great analogy or a great example to look at for the way the real drone industry is going to shape itself.
Thank you. And just to answer, XJet has just a couple of comments in the live chat, as you might expect, but very much talking about the spotter from the point of view of blind spots, etc., and FPV having fewer blind spots than general aviation. But one of the things which actually Troy has touched on tonight, which I don't think does get discussed enough, is yes, we talk about it in aviation terms, but as drone pilots, we are also stood on the ground, so we also have a responsibility for what's going on around us, and where what's on the ground, where our aircraft's going to go. So yeah, I think there are blind spots from that point of view, in my opinion. Does anybody else have anything they want to discuss on spotters before we move on?
I was going to say in the UK, I personally don't think it is necessary for certain operations. So, for instance, whenever I'm flying, I can tell you now I hear an aircraft before I see it. So whether I have goggles on, whether I'm looking the other way, whether it be a commercial operation or FPV, you hear the aircraft first. So from an aircraft safety point of view, the spotter element is less.
Do you always hear the aircraft first?
I will always hear the aircraft first.
Okay.
I never see it. I will always hear it first.
I would recommend going to watch a video on Ian in London's channel, where he was invited along to one of the military Air Force bases. And they actually flew an Apache helicopter to attempt to dispel that thought process across some fields. And yes, we're talking about low flying, and I realize that. But actually, he was shocked that he could see the Apache quite a bit before he could actually hear the resonance coming off the buildings of the Apache, actually of the noise. And we're talking about a noisy helicopter. Yes, but perhaps my fear is that the air ambulances, that type of thing, that are flying fairly low, and those type of, and it is the 1 in 1,000 issue that could cause that. But yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I think, there's always a scenario where it won't work. But if you take on average, we have like a shielded operation thought we're below 50 meters and stuff. And, from people on the ground, one thing I know is when I fly FPV, your senses are heightened in other areas where your eyes are looking at one thing, your ears are doing something else. Half the time I'm spending half my time lifting the goggles to have a look what's around by my feet. And it's normally something crawling around or something like that. So I think everything's about risk. Everything is about a balance of risk versus reward. So what we have to look at is how many incidents there's been and how many incidents have actually been avoided as a result of a spotter. And that's really hard to measure. That's really hard for an insurance company to quantify.
Because it's the reporting thing, isn't it? Try and find the numbers on something which isn't reported. Which Simon Ritterband. I mean, how do you quantify the risk of something when of course, and we had this conversation with Simon Dale as well in our interview, where actually FPV UK are asking people to actively report crashes and incidents they have, so that actually they can prove that because there was no outcome, there was no damage, no outcome from that actually, despite the crashes, it's still something that's very safe for the Article 16 to continue. But quantifying risk in FPV for an insurance company must be quite a difficult thing.
Sorry. They've just taken a standard view that any FPV racing or acrobatic flights is just a no-no. That's how they've drawn a line under it and said this to us is we just can't accept the level of losses on this.
Yes, indeed, especially hull coverage as well. When you're talking about drones that are specifically pushed to the point of crashing, of course, because that's part of FPV racing, etc. So no, that's.
But when it comes to FPV flights, as I say, we're already underwriting the DJI FPV work. If someone was to approach us and say we've got we're doing a film shoot, we've done a custom build FPV drone, we will happily look at it. It will be underwritten on we will assess it. But you wouldn't be insured as a resale value. It would be insured for parts because you'd be expected to rebuild it.
Of course, yes.
But there's no reason why we wouldn't look at it as a case-by-case situation, say, yeah, we're happy with this. You're flying safely. You've got an operational safety case or the equivalent. good to go, and premium will be generated based on that. Yeah, we haven't got any issues with looking at those sort of FPVs for non-racing or acrobatic work.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
You're smiling, Troy. What's
I think he might also be smiling from the chat.
I'm trying.
You were smiling.
I'm trying not to troll the comments, dude.
Yeah.
It's just so easy. Like, I'm sorry, guys. Like,
This is supposed to be a debate.
So jaded and blinded by your. I'm sorry. Like, you're blinded by the fact that you just are unable to even see another point of view. Like, it's just crazy. Your first person perspective is straightforward, and that's it. So you're kind of proving my point. It's just wild. I don't know. I think it's interesting that we cherry pick data about how safe FPV is when, like I just said in the comments, let's go on any page right now and go look this, count up how many people have cut themselves on props today, how many people have tried to take off and it flips over, have posted about how they were flying and 200 meters away, their drone just fell out of the air. Like, it's all over. But it's not in the news because you're right. The safety record is most people try to fly away from things and other people, and we do. But again, there's an automated world coming, man, and there's the accessibility to these things are only growing, and it's only going to become worse. And so, as much as people don't want to say it, it's going to be much more closely aligned with the gun industry than it is any other industry.
Well, you're looking at
going to be like regulated, and again, at some point there will be a like, if I go fly my drone out there in 10 years, like in the middle of some navigable airspace, something bad's going to happen probably to me. Like, not bad, like I'm not going to die. I'm not going to get like thrown in prison probably, but I mean, unless it's really like the wrong airspace. But you see what I'm saying? Like, it's coming. Like, I don't know what to say. Things will change. So I don't know.
Yeah, we see, and in this country, the way that from a regulation point of view that's being dealt with at the moment is that we do have things like the Article 16 authorization, which is something which Simon Dale from FPV UK, who sat next to you, Troy, was instrumental in putting into place, which actually allows FPV pilots essentially an exemption as long as they are a member of FPV UK or one of the other organisations, and therefore they have public liability insurance. They've read a handbook. They're taking mitigating steps to ensure their flight is safe. They're making sure that their takeoff landing. They're also carrying out a risk assessment before they fly at a new location. And to me, that kind of makes a lot of sense, because that is stepping, as you were saying before, that a lot of the people that watch these kind of channels and commit time to watching live shows and things are, of course, responsible drone flyers. And, again, I like the Article 16 authorization from the FPV point of view, because it gives responsible flyers a safe way of being able to fly in congested areas and that type of thing, which I think is excellent. Okay, moving on from that subject, as we have a few minutes left, we will run one of these again in the new year, because I think there is literally probably about 6 hours of discussion that we could easily have on this. And this is one that perhaps might bring the temperature down in the chat slightly. But how do we look to protect the hobby to ensure that younger people join without hurdles? And this is something which, again, was thrown at me by my audience and Discord and the other areas that people were able to contact me, from the point of view that they feel that regulation, registration, insurance, cost, that type of thing is starting to hold people back. How do we keep things open? And Ian, can I ask you that one first?
I don't think regulation does. Okay, if you look at how do families get into football, kids doing sports, like A, it's expensive, B, it's a nightmare, and C, there's always something you've got to do, a form you've got to sign and something. So it's not about that. It's about clubs. It's really simple. We need clubs. Everything comes down to clubs, and clubs opening their arms to new users.
Excellent, yeah.
That, in my experience in the UK, hasn't been very good with regards to FPV. And I'm not going to name any organizations, but there has been this very anti-drone sentiment, and that's really what's pushed the UK to where it is. And Simon has created something which has opened the doors for many people to join an organization without having to put up with the stigma or the hassle that comes with it, with the other side of things. So it's clubs. It's really simple. You want somewhere that the kids can go, enjoy what they're doing in a safe environment, and not feel like they're doing something wrong. And that just needs places to do it. It's that simple.
Excellent. Okay. Does anybody else have anything that they want to say on that particular subject? Yeah, Troy, thank you.
Oh, surprise, surprise. So funny enough, I actually am on an advisory board for Round Rock ISD, which is here. It's the same school district my son goes to. Their technology center is actually right behind our shop. I am a very big proponent for what Ian, first of all, just said about clubs, VP of an AMA club, one that is a very small club of the three that are here, and really the best one for FPV. And that's sad because we still have, for 5 years, 6 years that I've been serving on that, as a vice president there, had to fight this. And we've taught and brought people together, funny enough, because this is a conversation that needs more talking about. The fixed wing and heli guys have a problem with FPV and drone folks for a reason that is kind of valid in various forms, but is never really understood. So first of all, heli and fixed wing folks typically have learned through AMA and all of the ways that the AMA has presented how to learn flight, have been very serious about it and treated these things like aircrafts and really appreciated regulation and stuff, right? Like they're not anti-AMA folks. They're all about using the club to do what they want to do. And I think that's where we're headed is, because there's friction between these divided lines, the problem is it's a sporadic, it's a sporadic ecosystem. Again, not every field is like ours where, as a VP, if you come to the meeting and start complaining about the drone people, well, we're going to explain and let's talk about it. And let's figure out why you're really complaining. And what we found was the fixed wing folks are complaining because the FPV guys are setting up on the runway. So they show up to the field wanting to just show up to their leisurely little club. It's a small club and, go fly their plane, and they see gates on the field where they're about to try to take off. And they just don't even want to deal with it. And I can understand that perspective, but it's still on them to communicate to the FPV folks, hey, I'm here to fly my fixed wing. The rule is you're not supposed to be on the runway. Can you move the gates? They don't even want to do that. They just see it and they're like, it ruined my day. I'm going home. I'm not even getting out of my car. And that's what starts the friction, right?
Yeah.
So in reality, clubs, get involved in your local club. Like try to serve as either, try to be elected in October when they do elections. I got reappointed. We didn't even have anybody run against me. Be a part of your club. The real question here, though, was how do we get kids involved? Get involved with your local school districts if you can. Just send an email to the science teachers or the department faculty members at the local district, and even find the technology person at the head of the ISD and say, I'm interested in drones. I want to help in whatever way you guys might need help implementing this stuff. And don't try to sell them anything. You're not trying to help them build drones. You just want to hear what their thoughts are and their pain points are and be a part of that. And that's what the call that we just had yesterday with the ISD is about industry partners helping shape the future of these curriculums. And what you're going to find is you're going to be annoyed and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's what they're doing. But you just have to help support them and guide them and bring other opportunities to them. So here, we brought Hydra FPV and the YDSC and to the call that we got invited to and said, hey, we want to bring Hydra and YDSC in because we think that they're a great fit for the school district to start competing in drone racing. And it's an out-the-box experience you can just do with the schools. And guess what? One of the school districts sent 2 teachers to Michigan from Texas in July to one of their curriculum, their first ever teaching expo thing. And we actually did a chat there and we got to talk to them. And we're actually going to go build a drone with those same teachers. They're already racing students and they're having a lot of fun and a lot of.
There are some very good STEM projects out there in schools, but I just don't think a lot of the councils are taking them up. It's an absolutely phenomenal opportunity for
so get involved.
Technology, building, engineering, mathematics, physics.
Yes.
And I just don't understand why, to get the kids in, this has got to be one of the most exciting routes into drones is to get them to do these STEM projects.
Indeed.
Well, this is the other thing. It's not just about drone racing. This is what we talked about yesterday. And I'm always preaching to the schools and to the educators. Okay. We need decision makers to understand that this isn't just about Part 107 or being registered as a drone pilot. This is about, like yesterday, they had a comp sci teacher who he introduced himself and was like, I'm just here to listen. I teach animation. And I actually interrupted the call right there and was like, guys, do you guys know that drone light shows require an animator to upload animation to the drone?
Exactly.
So your drone kids could go be building a project next month to build a drone with a Jetson board and lights on it. And then you could hand that off to your comp sci department, and the comp sci kids could actually just program it. Meaning that two different groups of kids are doing drone related things together, but separate. And that's the type of actual education experience that these teachers need.
Excellent. I'm going to very quickly move on and ask Simon Dell for if he had any comments on the club versus chap stood in the field side of things, because I know we're coming up to the hour mark where some of the guests need to move on. So Simon, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a couple of things I was going to mention. We're working with quite a big landowner at the moment who operates about 12 farms around the UK, and with the view to having flying sites on those farms.
Wow.
Yeah, so hopefully that'll come to fruition in the not too distant future, but that'll be a place for people to go and fly, which, you know, I think would be fantastic, and hopefully we can grow that beyond that. And the other thing we're doing just on this sort of topic is we're about to introduce junior membership, which is half price basically. So
fantastic.
If you're under 18, yeah, half price FPV UK membership.
Very cool. Okay, so we are going to be losing, I think, about 3 of our guests now at the hour, because people need to go and do different things. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll be back in a few moments with the remaining guests. But I'm actually just going to play out a quick viewer video whilst we sort out the magic behind the scenes. Okay, and thank you very much to Burlap and Light for the impromptu play of his viewer video, so that we could very quickly set that up. And thank you to the departing guests, Troy from Quad Standard Labs, and also Simon Ritterband and Simon Dale. I really appreciate you guys coming in an awful lot as I very carefully resize a couple of things here. John, you had a couple of things to say on a couple of the points that were raised. Did you want to take the floor for a moment? I was aware that you're being very kind and allowing others to talk for a large part of that.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed hearing the points and just listening to, a different viewpoint. Obviously, I think most people here probably know that I am not completely against regulation, but I'm also not pro more regulation. And so that's kind of where I come from. The question that was just asked, how do we protect the hobby to ensure young people join without hurdles? Like, yeah, there's all the stuff that schools can do to get people involved and get kids involved, but it's depressing to think about a future where you tell the kids, oh, hey, you can fly this in school, but you're not going to fly it at the park. You're not going to fly it outside your house. That is not going to get kids into this hobby.
Yeah, and I think what I'm thinking of, and for here in the UK, John, we have some new regulations coming in. Well, they're already in, but we have some classification of drones coming in that basically means if you're flying anything less than a sub 250 gram self build, you will have to fly far from people. So you living in a town centre, you would not be able to go out of your house, go to the local park, and fly your FPV drone. You just would not be allowed to do that unless you're a member of one of the organizations like FPV UK, which is different to AMA because you don't have to sign up to a local base or anything else like that. But then they got a special dispensation called, or an operational authorization called the Article 16, which basically means that if you're a member of that group and you have the insurance and you carry out all the mitigation, that you can fly. And to me, I'm one side of it that I'm concerned about, and I don't necessarily have an answer for, is the side of things where we look at it from the point of view of what about people that are coming into it? And when I hear the stories of how people got into this hobby, and whether it's FPV or camera drones actually, and especially at a young age, they just started taking things apart and building them, and getting a kit through the post, building that kit and taking it to your local park and flying it is exciting. It's engaging. It's something there's very, very low hurdle to that, if that makes sense. And but having to join a club that has a specific field that you fly from or that type of thing, well, then you've got to get ma and pa to drive you there. You've got to get this, you've got to get that. And I start to feel like it could be restrictive.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a different world of today compared to when a lot of these clubs were started. You don't need to join a club to gain knowledge in FPV. The internet has really changed all of that. And I don't see a reason why we should have to join a club and fly in a limited size field. There's really no reason for it. Yeah. So if people want kids to not get locked out of this hobby, there needs to be places to fly. I mean, look, in the United States, we have towns and cities right now that are unfortunately running amok, passing ordinances of all sorts of, and a lot of them are illegal, but some of them are not. Towns and cities will pass an ordinance where you can't take off and land within city limits. But
whether or not they're technically enforceable and that type of thing, it is still a hurdle. It's still something that, because again, I'm someone that prides myself in flying within the rules as much as I can. So actually, if I researched it and I did see one of those ordinances, if I lived over in the States, then yes, I would think actually I shouldn't be flying because my local authority is telling me not to fly. So it is very, very difficult. I completely understand that.
It is.
Yeah, just bringing the chat into things very, very quickly. I noticed Chris, Doc Murdoch FPV, hello, sir. He says at Geeksvana that only works in the US if the AMA clubs were to accept FPV flyers. Most do not and refuse to allow FPV flyers at their fields. And that is also an issue that we have in this country, that even we have, I suppose, our AMA, I think, Ian, you would agree, is probably the BMFA, from the point of view that's the more established, larger scale model RC flying, that those drone flyers coming in. And I love my own club, because they do accept drone flyers, and they're very, very generous to us. So thank you very much. I'm not complaining at you guys at all, but it is an issue, isn't it? The acceptance and actually getting, not even, because people often put a fence between FPV and camera drone flyers as different sides of the hobby and things. But I think there's almost another one of the older school RC side of things.
Yeah, look, I went to a club many years ago, and it was brutal. I'll be honest, I got ripped apart. That's the words I will use. And it was, it was like putting a chunk of meat in the lion's den. And it wasn't a pleasant experience, but it was a learning one.
Yes.
And look, everything's perception. Everything is, where do we think? We were saying earlier that FPV is an interesting part of the hobby because it is different from camera drones, because it's really hard to build a camera drone that is as good as what you get off the shelf or as safe. So, take the Mavic. We've just had the Mavic 3 launch. It is a work of engineering masterpiece, regardless of some of the issues.
Absolutely.
It is, regardless, an engineering masterpiece. However, in FPV, things are a little bit different, because the off-the-shelf FPV drones are either self-built, or you have DJI who've made their own, which is bigger, heavier, and no safer in many ways. Many more ways, actually less safe than an FPV drone. So
right,
we have to look at this like a bit like the PC industry. So we can look for reasons not to do things from a safety point of view and legislation. So we can say, oh, but how can we certify that isn't dangerous? Well, you still can build your own PC today. So someone will say, well, hold on, a PC doesn't fly. No, but it's an electrical device.
Unless it annoys you, of course.
Unless it annoys you, yes. But it's an electrical device. So you don't see kids getting electrocuted by PCs. And that is why, because they're now manufactured in such a way that the components are designed to be all, they're not, it's not Lego, but it certainly is all protected in itself. And drones are like that today. Your motors, they're all built to a certain standard. Your flight controllers are all built to a standard. So from a safety point of view, there is no difference in a drone that a user builds compared to a PC a user builds. And you don't get your home insurance company saying, we're not going to insure your home because you built your computer, because it's a fire risk. So we have to balance this. And yes, a PC doesn't fly. I understand that. But everything comes down to risk. And it's really hard to quantify risk, because how do you take it away, isn't it?
It is. And it is also an increasing risk, because there are more and more drones in the sky and that type of thing. But I just, and as I say, this comes from someone that look at my channel. I very much follow the rules. I'm a big believer in the new rules that we have here in the UK, in particular, even the UK version of the EU rules. But I just have this part of my soul, this part of my heart, which is just a little bit shaded at the moment, because I feel like the direction we're going in, and it isn't even a part of the hobby that I personally belong to, but I just feel like there's a real danger. I feel like there's a real issue, and if we don't confront it, and if we don't at least have our eyes open going into it, we could snuff out an entire side of the hobby, and it would just be, no one's, there's not going to be sudden government uproar because a hobby's suffering and that type of thing. The world will just move on, and as with other hobbies that have either been outlawed or just fallen by the wayside. And that's my issue with hurdles, is that the more hurdles that can be put into place. And the next part that I'll bring into you from the chat actually is one of Bruce Xjet's points, where it's saying, go the way of Canada, total exemption from prescriptive regulation for sub 250 gram. And that's an interesting one, because even just a short time ago, we would have thought, sub 250 gram, there's no way you can get a decent FPV drone or camera drone to do anything much at that kind of weight. And indeed, here in the UK, similar to Canada, if you're sub 250, you can fly in the A1 airspace, and in fact, with a Mini 2, you can even fly over people. And all you need for that is to have read the manual and to register the drone, which is actually more of a privacy thing here in the UK, ironically under the EU privacy rules, but never mind. So, do you guys think that there is enough in the FPV hobby, enough innovation from the point of view that hobby FPV drones could be sub 250, could be sub 500, that we could find a decent level where you know, I don't know, can I build myself a sub 500, sub 250 gram FPV drone that's going to be fun to fly and is going to give me the footage I want?
Yeah, it's doable. You know, we're almost there now. To be honest, the big
Okay.
issue today is the battery. I'll be honest, the weight now is in, you know, you'll get the drone down. It's the battery that's the problem today, more than the drone itself. You can make the drone really light. You can make the cameras smaller. It's really the battery that is pushing many of the drones over the edge. And that includes the ready to fly stuff.
It does, yeah.
It does. You know, if you look at the Mavic Mini 2, there's two versions. There's a 199 and a 249, and the 199 is for Japan, and it's the battery that's different. That's all it is. So
Indeed.
It is doable. I think we've got to be careful not to talk ourselves into more regulation in the drone industry. No, regulation is about control. It's not often about safety. It's about control, and it often is masked under safety. And I'm going to just twist this a little bit on.
Cool.
There's a lot of talk around cryptocurrency mining and stuff right now, and we've just had a lot of the conferences around the world where saving the environment and everything, and they're now using saving the environment as a reason to ban crypto. And I saw a really interesting word saying we need to ban it because crypto is used to fund crime. Well, do we think money's never been used to fund crime? You know, the mafia never took banknotes. So everything comes down to control. Everything is about how do we regulate it? How do we step it back so we've got control over what happens in the way we want it to happen? The reality is that the industry is safe enough. It's inevitable an incident's going to happen. I don't think any of us pretend for 1 minute the dark day won't come. It's inevitable. It's as sure as the sun's going to rise tomorrow. At some point, something will happen. Where the blame will lie in that is different. But
it's interesting you say that, though, because I agree with you, and the numbers, and just, you know, the good old law of if something is possible, eventually it will happen. You know, of course. But you don't see the significant number of issues, and I suppose if we could get sub 250, sub 500, then of course some of those issues start to fall away as well. A sub 250 gram drone hitting me on my back when I'm walking in the park accidentally isn't going to cause me a massive issue. It's going to be annoying, and I'm going to turn around and say, "Oi, you know." But you know, it isn't going to be an issue. Here's another. John, did you have anything you wanted to say on that particular subject before I move on to the next chat?
Yeah,
question?
I was actually going to bounce off of what Ian said about kind of going back to the computer, you know, how you don't need insurance to build a computer because it could go on fire or whatever. You know, we talk about the bad things that people can do with drones all the time. And, you know, look at all the bad things that people do with the computer. And there was a point in time where the United States government and governments around the world wanted to just outright ban encryption, because we all know that criminals can do bad things with encryption. You know, bad people are going to do bad things with anything, no matter what it is. They don't care about regulation. It doesn't even go through their head. So that's just another point I wanted to bounce off. You know, we don't have laws that restrict our devices, that check everything that we post before we upload it to the internet, because you know, someone could do something bad with it.
And as I say, I am very much pro regulation on the drone side of things. I think it does need some level of control.
I'm not anti.
The argument is where does that fall?
Where does it start and end?
But you know, I don't want to keep pulling extra up on the chat, but obviously he is vocal. And he's just said in the chat, we allow dogs in parks, but and dogs actually kill people every year. We do have, unfortunately, maulings and deaths from dogs.
And in the UK, Sean, you'll know yourself, there's been a few recently. You know, the UK is going through a horrible period. I think we're something like 3 or 4 public ones this year, isn't it, Sean? With young kids.
No, indeed, it is an actual issue. It is an issue, and it's also an issue from the point of view of people who are nefarious and who are criminals, having dogs as part of defense when they're walking through parks, etc. So if any of those dogs ever get loose, it's a problem.
Someone I speak to was telling me how in New York City they were flying one of the parks. It's a no-no, but they were flying one of these, and what they said was, you know, I see dogs all the time in the park, and that's okay, but they're worried about this. They had to come and tell me to stop flying this when you guys are right. A dog could get off a leash, maul
Yeah.
a kid. I mean, that
So,
actually, I think, happens more often than an FPV drone cutting somebody up. If
Yeah.
we really want to look at statistics.
I do think as well, from the point of view that a lot of this is, established law and new law. You don't panic when a helicopter flies over your house. I mean, I live in a
No.
military part of the UK, a heavy militarized part of the UK, where there's bases and test ranges, all sorts of things around me. So I get Chinooks flying over my house, where I get the occasional tile falling off. They're flying so low, and I don't panic. I'm going out to the bin at 2 o'clock in the morning, and to put the bins out like a good boy, and I hear this, and I'm not sort of, panic, I need to call the police or something. I know that that's a Chinook that's doing some kind of night maneuver. And I think drones have had a hard time regulation and public perception wise, because they are still quite new. So actually this little buzzy thing appearing in the sky, of course it's a little plastic drone. It's not as significant as a helicopter flying over, an airplane flying over, and the same as dogs or anything else that need cars, that need regulation, anything else. I think that we do suffer the issue in terms of the public perception of the need, and some people's perception of the need for more regulation is actually because it's a new thing versus an old thing. If we'd been flying drones for as long as we've been driving cars, it probably wouldn't be an issue. It would just be second nature.
And it's not just drones either. If you look at the electric scooter in the UK, and Sean will know where I'm coming from on this, they are illegal. Electric scooters are illegal in the UK. And I firmly believe there's crazy laws around these things, that it's illegal to ride an electric scooter on the road, period, regardless, adult, child, or whoever you are. And I think it's bonkers. I think the UK needs to relook at it, at least at some level. And I firmly believe, how is it any different, Sean, than me getting on a push bike, electric push bike?
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, actually, because I put out a video last year, and I think Bruce has done a video on this previously as well, about the fact that in the UK we are deregulating electric scooters, mainly because they want to let the hire companies come into the cities, and to be able to obviously bring income and jobs and that type of thing, which I of course I support. But it's obviously deregulating something that has had deaths. There was a YouTuber killed in London on one, and that type of thing. And I think the difference is that you've got a motorized piece of equipment that could go wrong. But then I have to stop myself, because I'm like, well, actually, exactly as you're saying, what's anything saying that electric scooter is any less or more dangerous than me flying my Mavic 3 or an electric bike?
Scooters,
yeah, exactly.
Playing baseball or
mopeds.
all these things.
Can we go back very momentarily to the spotter issue, because the Mojek puts a great comment in the chat a good while ago, and I am going back and looking at other people, the old chat, by the way. I know that was very frenetic when we had the full crew in here, but we only had them for the hour, so I wanted to try and get some of those questions started, and we will continue this debate with the same crew in January. But the Mojek actually brings up a good point, and it's a point that brings me on to something I want to reference, and it almost moves the spotter argument conversation onto something else. And he's saying, could a spotter keep track of an FPV drone doing 99 miles an hour? And I can see the point in that. If I was asked to watch an FPV drone on behalf of someone for zipping around, I don't necessarily know where that person's going to fly, so I don't know whether they're heading towards or away from danger. I'm an old man, I'm 45 years of age. Am I going to spot the thing as far away as the young pilot would with his glasses off, or that type of thing? An experienced pilot that can spot something on the goggles that he sees. But to me, the spotter isn't an aviation issue. It's a land issue. It's a ground issue. And that's the thing that I need my FPV friends and my FPV enemies, if you see me as such, to talk to me about, because my concern is when I'm flying my DJI FPV drone, and I am a novice, so I'm not used to having them on. I'm not used to my other senses, my spidey senses in FPV haven't increased yet or anything else like that. I don't have enough stick time. But my issue is the people on the ground. So if I'm flying under Article 16 authorization, an FPV drone with goggles on, and I'm immersed and there's no spotter, what happens regarding the people on the ground around me coming in and out of contact of a even a quiet park? You're still going to get the odd dog walker zipping across and that type of thing.
But from my point of view, the spotter is, for me, the spotter is not there to look at the aircraft. The spotter should be there to look at everything else. So other aircraft encroaching the area and land issues. Now, I'm never that concerned about land, because I would be generally flying somewhere where I would be seeing that on the aircraft anyway. Do you know what I mean by that? You know, but then again, that is a different story to someone flying through trees, because you wouldn't necessarily see it. So I think the spotter argument it's a tough one. For me, I feel if you're flying open area below 50 meters with the risk of incursion absolutely minimal, so you're not near a hospital, you're not near somewhere where you're going to expect something to come through at low level, then I don't feel a spotter is needed at all. I think there should be the ability for you to go, you're on your own, you're in an area where you've got a somewhat secure environment. And in the UK, we've got 240. So the A&L has 240 to cover everything, which is, have you endangered other aircraft?
241, but yes,
241. Well, 240 and 241.
Sorry, I'm just being OCD. But
yeah, you got 240. Is it in danger? And 241, which is people, aircraft, etc. So we've got the law in place, which is really simple. If you shouldn't have done it, then the law's there to deal with you. It doesn't necessarily require a specific law that we have that you need a spotter. There are occasions where you will need it, but there are occasions where you need someone to help you back your car out of a tight parking bay because you can't see for the traffic around you. So yeah, I'm not so worried about people on the ground, because as I said, for me, I hear a fly landing on my foot when I'm flying FPV. I spend as much time dropping the goggles up and going, what's around me? You know,
what's your thoughts on that, John? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And to add to this point, you know, going back to how do I put this? How do I put this in the right way? So as far as liability goes, right, it's almost like we act as if there isn't a regulation. There's no way to hold anybody liable for anything. If I'm in a park and I decide to launch my 5-inch drone and it's got, you know, the big blades and it does hit somebody, okay, because there's a crowd of people or whatever, I can still be held personally liable for that, okay? There's no regulation that's going to make a difference here or there with that. So I don't necessarily see the need to draw up all these regulations when each person should be able to look at a situation and make a risk assessment on their own. Just like if you're in a park and you're swinging a baseball around, there's no baseball regulations. That ball could go off, hit somebody in the head or hit somebody in the eye. And now you've got basically a home. Look, I have an umbrella policy. We talk about insurance. I have an umbrella policy with my homeowner's insurance. Okay,
100% understand what you're saying. I really do.
Anyone who does have a homeowner's policy should check with your insurer to see if you can get that and see if they exclude drones. Because if they don't, it's a great thing to add. It's not that much more expensive, and it adds sometimes a couple millions worth of coverage that might help you out just in case something happens, right? So we act like there's no way to deal with this with the laws and courts that we already have, in the case that there even is something that occurs. So I think that the spotter thing should really be, if it's just a wide open field in a park with nobody around, it should really be up to the pilot to do their own personal responsibility risk assessment. That's just how I feel.
And in actual fact, with the Article 16 authorization in this country, which is now being used actively by FPV flyers up and down the country, one of the things you do actually have to do is, when it's a new site, you have to carry out a risk assessment, and some of the organizations actually make you upload them as a PDF onto their website and that type of thing, to say that yes, I have checked things out and these are the mitigations, these are the things I'm doing to try and ensure this flight is safe. Now, just very quickly, we are going to answer a few more things from the chat as well, but I wanted to thank everybody for sticking around and having this chat with us. The idea behind this, the idea of this conversation, is like everything else on my channel. I'm trying to get to the bottom of things. I'm not saying to the RC or the FPV community, this current rule is the best thing, stick to it. And I'm trying to have that debate and trying to open up the debate, because I don't think we talk about some of these things openly enough from the point of view of fear of trolls, from the fear of one side, reacting more than another side. And, I want to see I want to see more healthy debate on this from the point of view that I don't want to be, as someone that's in the YouTube community, so therefore has some kind of voice. I don't want to be 5-10 years down the line and regret not having these debates, not having these discussions, whilst we can still make changes and course correct from the point of view of keeping the hobby as alive as possible, frankly, which I think is a really important thing. So where do you see the next 5 to 10 years going then, guys? Do you think FPV is going to very much like you could argue camera drones is at the moment? We're talking about, lighter and lighter drones. Who would have thought the Mavic 3 would be under 900 grams? Well, funnily enough, a regulation says under 900 grams, and you can do all sorts of fun things with it here in the UK and the EU. So strangely enough, a sub 900 gram Mavic 3 comes in. I would, if you asked me that a year ago, I wouldn't have thought the Mavic 3 would have been 900 grams. So it's interesting from that point of view. Where do you see FPV going? Do you see these little ready to fly kits becoming the norm for the hobby, or do you think the larger 5-6 inch quads, etc., will still have their place?
FPV is going to get a bit it's getting heavier before it gets lighter is an interesting thing, because the transition to digital that we're in the midst of beginnings of a transition to digital in FPV. So, analog FPV has, and it still is the number one and will be for some time, but this year I've seen the real push from users to want to move to digital, and that's adding weight. So the weird situation is we're actually getting a bit bigger and heavier. However, the reality is it's going to get smaller. We're towards the weight limit now. It's not going to get much lighter. It's not like a flight controller is very heavy. They're very small. It's the battery tech that's going to get us. Below 250 is 100% achievable. Below 200 is probably the next target now. That's where the real difficulty comes, because there's a combination of strength versus weight as well, depending on the kind of FPV.
Yeah. Because that is one of the issues as well, isn't it? Troy was talking about the Parrot drones, which I had a Bebop one, an AFI, etc. And yes, they are. If you fly one of those things into a tree, it's just going to disintegrate, and also if it hits a person. And of course, that kind of flies in the face a little bit of FPV, of anything remotely serious, doesn't it? Because of course you want rigidity, you want strength, you want something that can bounce off the grass and be okay, and that type of thing. And there's an aspect to FPV which kind of goes against the new thinking in the wider drone sphere of things being destructible, not giving more than 80 joules if it hits someone in the head and that type of thing. So there is that sort of juxtaposition, and perhaps lower weight drones could be part of the answer.
Look, the danger isn't the weight, it's the props. The reality is still today, if we're going to talk about if we had to risk assess, the danger is the props right now. If it's going to hit someone, that's where the danger is. It's the weight is one part of it. The props are going to do a bit more damage before the weight. So how do we mix it? That's the bigger mitigation, and that's a problem not for FPV. That's a problem for the whole drone community.
Yes, agreed.
That's a problem we have to solve. Is it ADUX? I don't know. Did you see that drone that was available? The
drone,
almost the Star Wars thing. You face it with a lightsaber.
Oh.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
And look, that's the reality. I think FPV is going to have a tough 5 years, regardless if we like it or not. Legislation is coming. It's already laid in the path. I think it's still stayed under the radar. I think the government have sort of not really seen it much. And Simon's been poking away a little bit, getting some, we're just little FPV. We just want these little concessions, and they've been happy to give them. Hopefully that will continue, but at some point I think we're going to get a bit of a snap back from them, and they'll probably I wouldn't be shocked to see FPV banned from congested areas, whereas Simon's managed to get that in. I can highly see that coming. As you say, 60 mile an hour projectile in a congested area. It will
Yeah.
go through someone's window.
Do you therefore, and this is actually one of the subject pieces which didn't come up in our main chat, do you therefore look from the point of view of, like, for instance, here in the UK, we have the A2 CFC, we have the GVC, operational authorizations, soon we'll have the beyond visual line of sight bolt-ons for that, and that type of, all these exciting things, but very much, and anybody can take them, and then you can get your operational authorization with your GVC from the CAA, and then you will basically be able to fly the list of quads, the list of drones that you've got approved, which includes FPV drones. Do we need to see a situation where there actually is a separate set of qualifications for FPV from the point of view that, you know, an A2 CFC aimed at someone, it is, you know, FPV in brackets or something, so that you know that person that's flying that is qualified and can actually fly the drone in a safe manner, knows how to switch the thing off and make it drop out of the sky if there's a problem, or, you know, and actually knows, because of course FPV is this whole thing of if you're not crashing, you're not learning, sort of side of things. But is that an aspect? Do you think that could help save that side of the FPV hobby?
The problem is it doesn't change anything, because it's like insurance and it's like all regulations. They only apply to the people who follow them and do it properly. And again, you know, you could introduce legislation tomorrow that says every FPV flyer must go through a 2-day safety course. Nothing will change, because those of us, like all of us here, if it was mandated, I'd do it because of the world me and you live in, Sean, as well as, you know, if it was in the UK as well as John, you'd go, okay, I got to do it. You know, I talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
However, the reality is the guy down the road who doesn't care, well, so it won't change the safety record. So again, that comes down to control. That is, how do we, what did drone registration do more than anything? It didn't change the safety. What it told them is where all of the drones are.
Yes.
So a classic example is, now I'm a registered PFCO, I'm a drone registered user. If something happened in my locality, let's say there was a drone incident within a quarter of a mile of my home, I can almost guarantee I'm going to get a knock on the door. And that has come as a result of me following legislation.
Yes, indeed.
And that's the problem, isn't it? You know, and that's the problem with this. If we have something for FPV, it's just going to give them a door to knock. It's not going to make it any safer.
Yeah, enforcement's an interesting one, actually. And Patrick Sutton in the chat has said, I think we're going to see a lot of lawbreakers because the FAA can't be everywhere, and the same with the CAA and therefore the UK police. And law enforcement will have better things to do. Frankly, people are just going to fly, and laws be damned. Now, I understand that point of view. Honestly, I do. I honestly understand that point of view. My issue, and where I see the regulation not being the problem, but where I see the regulations will come into their own and will have their teeth, is if something goes wrong. And so, you know, if you do hit a car, or, you know, with your drone, it smashes the windscreen, you know, all these fantastical things that don't happen. But anyway, if you were to be the 1 in a million drone pilot, and things happen, or someone complains about your flight and that type of thing, and you're not registered, and you're not adequately, if required, insured, and that type of thing, then that's where the hobby starts to unravel, because of course that, rather than look at the flight and say, actually, was it really their fault? You know, actually, you know, they're registered, they're insured, they did risk assessments, they've you know, this is their 300th mission this year that they've flown, etc. They know what they're doing, their flight plan was safe. Stuff happens. But actually, if all of those things aren't in place because we think they're not going to be enforced, then that's more people that are going to see more significant. They're going to get the book thrown at them, frankly. And that's the side of the enforcement side of things, especially in the UK, that I fear.
Yeah, I think I just, the only thing, because John hasn't said much yet, but the only thing I think
yeah,
is,
sorry,
I've
John,
seen,
we're meaning and get
That's all
chatting.
cool.
Yeah, I've been through a couple of sets of regulations outside of the drone industry in the over the years. So to give you background, I was a qualified electrician. I've seen the gas safe regulations come in for gas work and stuff. And what regulation does is it gives recourse, is what regulation does. It doesn't change bad behavior. You know, when they introduced electrical safety regulations in the UK for installers, so, you know, you had to be a qualified electrician to do work. It didn't stop cowboys. All it did was gave them recourse when something bad went wrong. And that's what regulation does. It doesn't stop bad behavior. It just gives them an angle to go at when people are caught misbehaving. And the annoying thing for us in the drone industry is that was already in place.
Yes.
We're just laying more and more legislation on top of current legislation.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it is very much, especially as John was saying before about the fact that, you know, if you do hit someone in the park, there is existing legislation, there are existing laws where that you can be dealt with from that point of view, and I understand that. Please,
right,
John.
and we have building code, right, and we have things like building codes and all that, because the reality is the average person has no idea if their home is being built safely. And a lot of guys would just build the homes as cheaply as possible and might not care. 10 years down the road, now they've got a problem. And the homeowner is going to need some kind of way to deal with that. That's why we have those regulations. I can't look and say, oh, this is safely built. This is safely built to code. You know, that's why we have that. So yeah, I agree.
And
that makes sense.
It's completely, because it is an interesting side of things from the point of view that, you know, with our camera drones here in the UK and EU, we are about to have them all C labeled, so we'll know, you know, someone will have assessed, okay, yes, this is a C1 safe drone, so you can go off and fly that in a congested area above people and all that sort of thing. And, you know, it's almost, you know, it's ironic that somebody with a camera drone that's C-rated with no qualification, they've read the manual and they've registered it, can do more with their drone and can technically get themselves into more risky situations than someone that knows everything about that drone because they've built it. They know every wire, they know every inch of that frame, they know why they chose that frame, they know why they prefer those motors, why they love those props, why they put that camera on there, the rates. They know absolutely everything, far more than I ever know about my DJI drones, you know, far more. And that to me feels like there's an imbalance just because you can't get that FPV drone C rated. You can't get a sticker on it, like Troy was saying earlier about being able to do that. And that to me is a shame.
The interesting thing, when you do look at the regulations, they've never been about safety. And in fact, the FAA openly said it was not about safety.
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that. I wouldn't dispute that.
And that's the funny thing, you know. If we take remote ID,
I think it's risk, and I think there's safety in there. But certainly that old rhetoric that we used to hear an awful lot from regulators around the world of safety. This is a safety issue. That has dropped away, hasn't it? When you see the press releases now and the admissions and things from regulators, safety is no longer the primary thing. It's sort of responsible use, and you know,
it's control, isn't it? It really does come down to two things: control and recourse. So, you know, remote ID exists to allow them to see who it was. That's what it's not to stop the incident happening. Would you
argue that remote ID helps from the point of view that if every responsible flyer in the sky is identified, then it helps to spot the bad apples quicker?
I've never had a complaint with unidentifiable remote ID without the pilot's current location. So what I mean by unidentifiable is a code is transmitted, not my name and address. Do you see what I mean? Something that law enforcement could gain access to, but not everyday public. Okay, so a randomized unique identifier, for instance, is a simple term to use. I have zero issues with remote ID as long as the pilot's location is not transmitted, because I have always had fundamental concerns for pilot safety when if someone was able to open an iPhone app and go, oh, there's a drone 400 foot over there, and the guy is in that field, just in that corner. Let's go get him, boys. That's the bit I have a problem with. You know, fundamentally, I don't care about the aircraft chirping away. Yeah, it's the ground stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I had a video very recently, which I think I titled it "Has the FAA thrown FPV under the bus?" Looking at the United States side of things, because they had one of their live streams and they literally said, it's not our problem. It's a law enforcement issue. If you have someone, you know, and if it becomes an issue, we will of course do something about it. Well, every single FPV, every single drone pilot in the US is telling you it's already a problem. It's telling you that identifying where I stand with a $5,000 DJI Mavic 3 Cine in the air is an issue, frankly, and it is one that I'm personally very passionate about. I killed it there. Just very quickly before you start your point. Sorry, John. I did type in the chat to XJet that we need to have you on here for a show at some point. He did say any time. I will be emailing you after this show, Bruce, because you're one of the faces that I've wanted on here, and I think the balance between me and Bruce would be an interesting show. Because
I agree.
Because actually, I enjoy debating Bruce's videos with him when he doesn't even know I'm doing it. Actually, when I'm talking at the screen whilst his videos are playing. Because he of his immense knowledge and the fact that he's able to reason argument out, and I would love to have that sort of face-to-face discussion with him. So I will be emailing you. Keep an eye out for your in your email, Bruce, and we'd love to have you. Perhaps we can have Ian back to moderate, as he knows us both very well. But John, you were about to make a point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just also about Bruce. Bruce has done a hell of a lot to not just fight for drones and FPV in his country, but pretty much around the world. So yeah, he knows. Yeah,
I think there is always a danger, as Troy was saying when he was in, that we become blinkered to one point of view, and I think that is an issue. And I think that, but I also think that you have to have extreme points of every conversation. As much as we in the UK have people standing up in Parliament talking about Gatwick as if it was a fact, and that there were drones at Gatwick when we've still had no evidence of one. We also need people that are shouting just as loudly at the other end of the scale as well, frankly, because hopefully things are then somewhere in the moderate middle. But although I think Ian would laugh at that with British politics these days. But
is there a moderate middle in the British politics anymore, Sean?
Is there a middle even? Is there is there a middle to be moderate? But we won't get political on Geeksvana this evening.
So basically, my overall opinion of the remote ID and being able to publicly see the pilot location, I'm not happy about that anyway, but I got to tell you, most of the time when I'm flying, if it's like, let's say if I'm flying in a park or something, it's not going to take that long for someone to find me. It's not going to take that long because usually I fly proximity, right? All someone would need to do to find me is just, walk around the park and look for the guy who looks like Geordi LaForge from Star Trek. I mean, it's not hard to spot the FPV pilot in a given area for like most general freestyle flights.
Yeah.
So
no, indeed.
In many ways, for me, the public identifier for proximity freestyle FPV is probably non-consequential. But what bothers me more about it is just going to be the burden and expense of having to comply with that on these models when the bad apples are not going to be doing it anyway. So how is it going to enhance safety? For me, I'm thinking it's going to be another thing to add weight to the drones. It's going to be another thing for me to worry about braking.
Yes.
Which,
no.
If I break my remote ID module, now I can't fly.
For the FPV community in particular, it is a cost hurdle. I completely agree with you from that point of view. It is another cost hurdle, and I don't like cost hurdles for regulations point of view.
It depends on how they implement it too.
Could you argue though, for instance, sensitive locations, I'll say airport, but prisons, wherever, especially in the UK, we now have a lot of counter UAS, and Ian's ears will prick up with his Drone and Sundry live show with the counter UAS discussions, and it's there are already devices there watching our drone flights and that type of thing. Now, from my point of view, what I wonder, just again looking at the other side of things, if there are 5 drones being flown in the area and they all have remote ID and they're showing up on this person's radar, they can see them. One shows up that isn't remote ID, it's already something that they can get out there and face head on from the point of view of trying to see if that drone operator is an issue. Would you not see that is an argument?
Counter UAS is a political subject at the best time because there's so much snake oil among reality, unfortunately. But yeah, I think there's a lot of concerns with remote ID on two sides. Ignore the hobby second, you've got the commercial operator side. So how that operator is being tracked in what he does. So for instance, if you've got a network that's tracking these remote ID devices, if it's not a randomized ID, then you could have the potential of one business owner tracking what another business owner is doing, saw him flying at that location, tomorrow knocked on the door and said, oh, what was he doing? Whatever he's doing, I'll do it cheaper. Or we'll, there's this business concern for people about what's happening with that data. And in the UK, we got the DPA. And then how is my data then being managed? How long is it being kept for? And look, we had a huge talk with thing at it's completely jumped out of my head. Not Simon. Simon Dale's coming into my head because we've had Simon on. Simon's name keeps coming into my head, but it's not Simon. It's come on, Sean. It's who does the software? Yes, Altitude Angel. What's Richard? Richard. How could I forget Richard's name? I was giving Richard abuse at Altitude Angel. And and look, Richard was talking really interesting about at what point did they delete the data? And it's a really interesting argument because you could have a user who does something dodgy and thinks, oh, I know my data's there. Under the DPA, I'm asking you to delete it. Well, what happens then? Should there be a sandbox that the data goes into for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? So there's this whole argument about remote ID of how do we protect everything about remote ID has been about protecting everyone else except the pilot. And this is the problem with it right now. It's all been about everyone else. And there's been no consideration of actually, hello, I'm the person at the center of this. What are you doing to protect me? I think we're going to have networks set up. If you get remote ID go out, I'll have a network. I'll be building my own one. I can see there being something very similar to you have with the farm GPS networks. For those who don't know, a lot of farmers have set up their own individual N-trip servers to allow them to get very accurate GPS for their combine harvesters and all of their farming equipment. And there's like groups of people setting these little networks up that all communicate. And I can see that happening with remote ID. But again, then how is that data managed? You're going to have websites where you can go on and see every drone in the UK. It's not going to be the government's website. It's just going to be a group of users set up a little website and a portal going, look, here's every drone that's flying. Here's all of the IDs. Yeah, no, indeed. So it is managing all of this, and it is going to be very different for us all. The reality is your aircraft are chirping today. The control link is chirping. It's all there signaling, I'm here, look at me. Anyone who's...
If the authorities want to know if someone's flying in a particular area, they already know. Frankly, 100%. If they want to know what's flying, not who's flying it, and of course that's where remote ID comes in, doesn't it? Really, that especially exactly as you were saying with the registration side of things, a matrice is spotted doing something dodgy in downtown South Wales, then of course it's you that's going to get the knock at the door because you're a local PFCO holder, perhaps even if it was a Mini 2 these days, actually. But anyway, so it is actually that's where it then becomes more accountable from the point of view that I agree with you. I think data is a significant issue with it all that hasn't been fully addressed yet. Completely agree with you there. Right. Okay. Now I promised just before we started the show. Did I stop you from talking then, John?
No. Go on. Okay, good.
Just before I started the show, I was telling my esteemed guests, and we had a fantastic panel on this evening, that I don't go on for hours and hours, and that we'll be done within an hour. Don't worry about it. The hour came and passed very, very quickly, and we're now coming towards the end of the second hour. So I'm going to let these guys go as well, and have their evenings and late evenings. And I want to thank everybody for coming in. I really appreciate it. It's fantastic. Thank you, Bruce, for coming in from XJet, Londonard, Jim's Droning, Jackrabbit FPV. Jason from GMI Visuals is a prime example of someone that perhaps sits on a different side of, not the fence, because I hope this channel brings down fences, but certainly sits on a different viewpoint to regulation than I do myself. But I find it fantastic that we're all able to sit and have these debates and have these discussions, because I do think that division in the hobby, putting fences between FPV and camera drones and everything else like that, actually all that serves are the people that do want to restrict us, and the groups out there that do want to have a heavy hand on the hobby and the commercial side of things. And I think the discussions like this are very, very important. And I'll certainly be bringing Bruce from XJet on very, very soon to the channel, hopefully, so that we can have our debates. And as I say, I'll probably time that for Ian to come on and be the moderator, as he knows us both well enough to tell us to shut up.
Cheers for that, Sean. Thanks.
Wow.
I'll come on and babysit him.
in the hot seat as myself and Bruce go redder and redder on both sides of the screen. But yeah, that should certainly be a lot of fun in any case. But again, I want to thank Simon Dale from FPV UK for coming on, the founder of one of our largest drone organizations. FPV UK are actually about to be a channel partner here on Geeksvana, because I wholeheartedly believe in what they're doing. The fact that they do it all for £19.99, less than £20 a month, you're getting millions of pounds of public liability insurance, access to all kinds of discounts. You can use the Article 16 authorization, so you can fly your FPV drone where non-members cannot. And that type of thing, I think, is fantastic for that kind of price point. So it's certainly one of the groups that I back here in the UK at the moment. Simon Ritterband, I want to thank him for coming on as well from Moonrock Insurance, because again, I think it's important when we have these discussions that we do bring the insurance side, the commercial side, into the discussions, because they will have very unique and interesting angles. So thank you, Simon, for adding to it. Troy from Quad Standard Labs, thank you for coming on. I've spoken to you a few times, and actually I heard a different side to Troy's opinions this evening, which was really, really interesting. And I want Troy back on very, very soon so we can expand on those and give some proper time to be able to really mete out some of the subjects that he was raising, which I think are very, very important. And of course,
I agree.
I want to thank these two awesome YouTubers. I'm not pointing in the right. It's like patting your head and rubbing your tummy, trying to point at the right people in the right direction.
Yep.
No, hang on. I'm going to do it. I don't care if it takes 10 minutes. Hang on, everybody. There we go. I want to thank these two guys for staying with me whilst I got my coordination.
Thank you for having us.
And I'm allowed to drive a car. There we go. But yeah, but thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. I see you both as really vocal and upright members of the FPV and the wider drone community. And I whenever we're together, I really appreciate it. I know, John, you and me have our little banter in other people's shows, and
Yes.
actually, because me and John are constantly calling each other names on other people's shows in the chat, a lot of people genuinely think we don't get on. But I have a lot of respect for this guy. He's actually on the Geeksvana Discord channel. He's our FPV lead, so he's the guy that steps in to help an awful lot of many of those UK FPV flyers with questions and that type of thing. You're so generous with your time. And Ian, the community that you're building is growing with the 23,000 subscribers. Woo!
It's getting there. It's getting there.
100K by this time next year, please.
100K. Oh, Jesus, I can't imagine. Do you know?
I
It's
can.
funny.
I can imagine it.
I can't.
I think you should be there already. Personally,
Dealing with 100. It's funny. You see the channel grow and stuff, and you just think, wow, okay. I remember 12, and you see 15.
Yes. Yes.
What I love more than anything is the live stream people, and I love everyone, but the community on the live streams is fantastic. And you have your community of people back and forth, and they're amazing. Because the thing is, it's not all about me. I can ask a question, and they'll give me the answers, and that's the bit I love. Is it's last week was a really quick example. I was looking for a piece of equipment, couldn't find it anyway. I asked it within 10 seconds. Someone sent me the website where I could order it, and it was bought and paid for. Yeah, that's superb. I spent 3 days trying to find one.
Yeah, but you see, keeping the communication open in this hobby and within the drone space, full stop, is so important. It's so important so that we can hold people to account, so that we can have the discussions, and we have people that think actually there shouldn't be any of these rules, and then people like me that actually I quite like the new rules, etc. And I think bringing all of those people together and having discussions is so important, because yes, it's just a YouTube show. It's not going to have any wider impact, but it has to start somewhere. These discussions have to start somewhere, and I'm very proud of the drone community, the fact that they're able to come together. I think like not many hobbies and professions can to debate the good and bad, frankly. So yes, excellent. But as I say, thank you both very much for joining us. Ian, what's coming up next on your channel?
As the professional YouTuber I am, yes, I know. Sorry, there's a video coming on non-drone related subject at the end of the week. Network NAS from non-drone related. And actually, one thing I would point out is Ian has just capped
kicked off the whole discussion about RC controller and the smart controller on DJI side of things with some great videos on talking about OcuSync and explaining all of that. I recommend that you go over and watch those if you haven't already, because they are literally, you're literally going to go to school and learn some things. And I think a lot of
it is a good video, and I made it, but it is
exactly.
a good video.
I love those
I made
videos.
it myself.
I love those ones when you step back and you go, do you know what? That's all right, that video.
Yeah, that's one of the better ones I've done for a while.
It doesn't happen too often to us, does it? But it is good. Mr. Coopy, what have you got coming up on your awesome channel? Which, by the way, both channels are linked in the description.
So you guys were talking earlier about whether we're getting heavier with the FPV drones or lighter. And I tell you what, I've been flying the little small ones like this. There are some incredibly powerful little quads out there now. Just look at this little guy. This little thing can carry an Insta360 Go. So I've got more of stuff like this coming up. I'm really, really impressed with the micro drones out there. This too is going to be, you can get this under 250 grams.
Ooh,
I mean, there's some pretty amazing stuff coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm working on stuff like that. And that's what you'd probably be seeing from me.
Ian.
Yes.
Ian. Okay, you know I love you, but can I not see you talk about OnlyFans in the chat ever again? I'm not saying I won't sign up to it, but I just don't want to get inappropriate live on air.
I mean, you don't want to get demonetized.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a video I made you probably didn't see. I took it down after about 6 hours. Oh, you did see it. You replied.
I did see it. I commented on it. Why did you take it down?
It was one I thought it was appropriate for a very short period of time.
Okay.
But
can you please re-release it on New Year's Eve or something for a couple of hours so that we can see it again?
Because it's wrong in many ways.
It is. But I love those kind of videos on a channel, and I know what you mean, because like my Halloween one was one which we did with the SETI Institute this year, and you know those type of videos, I do tend to put them up for a few hours on that holiday period and take them down again, and just they're still there. It's just unlisted.
Yes, it's there. It's still there.
You have to go find it on the community
with the
tab.
link. It's still there. If anyone has the link, it's
if
still
you have the oh really? So I can go back on the notification. Okay.
Yes.
Download live next week on Geeksvana. You'll find the video that Ian from Magtech
taking
the
mick out of two people, fantastic people,
but it was awesome. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Excellent. Well, again, thank you guys. I'm spending longer saying goodbye than we spent in the actual show, but thank you everyone for joining us in the chat. I really do appreciate it. Bruce, check your email in a few minutes, and we'll see you next time on Geeksvana Live. No, yes, and you're coming back to compare it. I'm sorry, you were going to be the. You were going to be the dude in the middle. I was going to call you Piggy in the middle.
Pretend to send it. You don't have to do it. Sure. Sorry, we still
would
on it.
Be a great moderator, I think.
I think Ian's perfect.
I agree with your nomination.
Yeah, he knows us both well enough. So, all right, guys. See you next time on Geeksvana Live. Oh, next week on our show, we'll be back to Thursday night. It'll be at 8 p.m. UK time, I think. But our new host, Olive, who's going to be joining me live in the studio, it's going to be a very different type of drone show next week. We're going to have all sorts of segments where we're interacting. That sounds really dodgy, doesn't it? But we're actually going to be having an in-studio show next week, which is going to be very, very exciting, something new for the channel. So we'll see you then. We were supposed to start that last week, but unfortunately she tested positive for COVID. So I will part by saying, everybody wash your hands and be careful out there, just so that I'm giving a nod to another show there, Ian. Hey?
Yes.
Hey?